Thank you. Ray Murray and I are old sports writers, and about 90% of the research on sport media examines the content, whatever medium is producing it. So we're looking more at the actual practitioners, where there's a dearth of research in that area. And this was qualitative research to look at how they're adapting to various new tools in the new platforms, all right? For more than 2 centuries, newspapers were the dominant medium in sport. That has changed a great deal, obviously, as newspapers have downsized, as you've been hearing a lot about in this conference. And most of the top writers, columnists that you see on ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, et cetera, were former newspaper writers. Really, the only 2 exceptions were Bill Simmons and Jay Glazer. And, now basically new media are changing the way everything is done, distributed and consumed in sport media. And internet readers tend to be younger, and they look for more multimedia content. Whoa. So all of you know about Web 2.0. Basically, we use the study by Sherwood and Matt Nicholson out of Australia on how Web 2.0 is impacting the roles and jobs of sport journalists. The biggest impact has been Twitter. If you are a sports fan and you're not on Twitter, then you're really not a sports fan. And this stat shows it all. 1.2% of all U.S. TV programming is sports. I have 75 or 100 sport channels, including all the packages. It's all tax writable, and I can write it all off. But half of all tweets are sports related, okay? Go there during the game tonight and you'll see that, okay? Exploratory surveys showed most sports reporters use Twitter as a means to gather and share information, with younger journalists using it more often as a means of self-promotion, okay? And also Web 2.0 has also increased the amount of convergence in sport media, where newspaper editors and all types of editors, producers of TV, et cetera, want you to go beyond just reporting in your traditional medium. The little amount of research that's out there on this has been surveys. There's actually a good number of it from the news side, but not in terms of sports. Most of it has just been surveys. So what we're trying to do is a phenomenology where we interviewed actual newspaper sports writers, and newspaper sports writers are the most old school style there is, on the impact of the internet, social media, and Twitter on their job, work routines, and responsibilities. So here's the 4 overriding research questions that we used in doing so for this phenomenology. The data collection, we used purposeful sampling. This was a good critique by the reviewers. They said, did you just ask your friends? No, but we asked friends of friends, all right? That gave us better access. This was one of 3 studies in different areas where we interviewed about 35 sports writers over a year. So you do have to ask friends of friends, but we had never met 8 of the 12 in person, and none of them were good friends. Loose interview guide based on previous studies in this area, and the interviews were transcribed, coded, et cetera, search for dominant themes. And of course, this subject is interpretive, but we did have 2 people coding. Overall, the 12 participants, 11 men and 1 woman, you think, wow, that's awful. Well, that's actually the reality of the field. And this study is not a gender-based study, but that is the reality of sports journalism, which is a very hegemonic masculine culture in addition to the actual statistical differentials. Subjects' ages. We wanted experienced newspaper sports writers, so all had spent at least 7 continuous years in professional newspaper sport journalism, which is becoming a rare thing. Most people have been laid off now and moved around, and so these were all 7 straight years at minimum, up to 30-plus years, 31 to 64, and they'd been all around the country in terms of jobs. So this was an experienced group. And the 5 dominant themes that emerged from this analysis. 1, the speed of Web 2.0 has changed reporters' jobs for better or worse. And the idea of the better part, it's made researching stories so much easier, and keeping up with what's happening on your beat or what you're covering so much easier. However, they said a continuous theme was that you must put out the information quickly now through Twitter and or the company's website or your own website, or you could be beaten on it. And they said one thing that came out is this is to fulfill the instant gratifications and wants of new age users. The idea, and one of them called it the gimme now generation. You've got to have it right now versus waiting until the next day. At the same time, Web 2.0 has reduced the consequences of getting beat in competition. So, for example, a Major League Baseball, and we use a condition of anonymity to interview these folks to get the best answers, but a Major League Baseball reporter in the Northeast, one of the beat writers, said basically, from talking to the other guys who were on the beat, they would wake up in the 90s, they would wake up in the morning and have the terror of reading every other newspaper to see whatever you miss. I don't have that feeling anymore. Everything is broken on Twitter or online somewhere. You just don't miss much. If you do get beat with something, you're beaten for 15 minutes and no one really notices. The internet just puts it there. The value of breaking a story is really minimized. If you break it, it's your story for a matter of minutes. Then you don't have it. All right, and that's true. They like to say, "Oh, Adam Schefter's reporting this, etc." But then everybody's going to report it quickly. And do you really know if he reported it or was it the person covering that team locally that did so? Because they're going to take credit for it on ESPN. 2, all journalists use Twitter for work, but most do not like interacting on Twitter. These folks were on Twitter all day long. The higher the level, the journalist, the beat you're covering, they're on it all, even if they hate Twitter, and some of them said they do, they're on it all day long, reading, following, etc., following the athletes they cover, etc. Even if you're a high school reporter, you were following the athletes and coaches on Twitter. However, most said they do not like interacting with fans or followers because they feel it's a waste of time. And one of them said, I don't want readers to know about my personal life. At the same time, the younger reporters that we interviewed were more friendly to the idea of interacting with fans and followers on Twitter. But the overall conclusion was that some thought that Twitter had dumbed down sports journalism, particularly in the area of credibility, because something could go out there, go viral, and then everybody sees it, and this person claims to be a journalist but doesn't have any kind of training in that area. 3, Web 2.0 hurts newspaper industry sales but gives reporters individual power. We could sit here all day and talk about the downsizing of the newspaper industry and how much their bad reaction to the rise of the internet played into that and what have you not. But there's no doubt that there are fewer jobs a lot of people have been laid off and fewer jobs, top-line jobs covering beats now in that sense, although it's making a little bit of a comeback right now. But the interesting thing about this study that really came out was they believe they have more individual power because your stories are being seen by a much broader audience. People are linking you out all over the place. You can show through web page hits, through Twitter followers, etc., the impact you're doing. You're getting praise from other people in the profession when you break stories or write a good story. So, for example, one reporter that also covers a professional sports team said, most of the team's fans aren't reading our paper, but most of them are going to my blog once in a while, if not every day. They also go to my newspaper's internet site. My job security comes from that. My job is only still there for online journalism because these media consumers could just pick up another paper's newspaper content, and he gave the actual names of papers on the teams he covers. We offer more than just the basic stories on our online sites. So he was specifically putting content like notes pages, things that the hardcore fans would want to see, on his website and using that as a means for his newspaper to keep him employed when they've gone through a series of downsizing because he gets too many followers, too many hits in that area not to, all right? And so that was one thing they talked about. And Logan and Avery just talked about branding. Well, a lot of these reporters talked about the ability to brand their own name, et cetera, which is why I teach my young kids, don't put in the name of the paper you're working for or the media outlet in your Twitter feed. Use your name, because when they fire you or lay you off, you can take that Twitter feed with you, or if you get ideally a better job. But a lot of people disagree that are in the industry on the management side. 4, you must now be a multimedia reporter. All 12 of these had learned different skills, multimedia skills. The one that they were most uncomfortable with was the older reporters learning how to be on video. They didn't mind being interviewed. They did not want to do video reporting. What was interesting was the younger reporters were more comfortable. They actually had better training. They were more comfortable and more adaptable in these areas. So it's sort of what we're talking about in journalism curriculum today. They've had more multimedia skills, and whereas the ones that have been in the industry for 30 years, they just wanted to write, okay? And they were less comfortable and less adaptive to these areas, but all of them have learned new skills. And finally, this was interesting, bloggers. The only platform that outside of newspapers and writing content for newspapers that is put on the website, the only platform that all 12 of these had used were blogs. And what's interesting, it was by far the most vitriolic comments, and they all hated blogs. And I hope Jay Rosen isn't here after what he was talking about this morning, because the comments were, one said, first of all, blogging is still 1990s. Well, blogging was around before Web 2.0, but they were like War and Peace type blogs where you just see continuous text and bore you to death. Now the best blogs are multimedia content. And the overall content was that any fan in a basement could be a blogger, etc. And there was a lot of lewd language used when we're talking about blogs, and people just not liking it. You don't need to write well. You don't need to know any facts. You just need to put some words down, and there's certainly no accountability. One guy said, I'm a big fan of the First Amendment, but there probably needs to be some kind of law against blogging. And the idea being that they hated it this much, but yet they're all required to do a blog or have been required to do a blog for their paper. So in discussion, journalists know in multiple ways of Web 2.0 and Twitter made them better reporters, especially in the news gathering process. They're not going back into microfiche anymore or going to look at old copies of the paper. They're getting things quickly. But most also said the overall rise of Twitter hurt the overall quality of sports reporter due to the desire of disseminating info first, and also who gets to count as sport journalists. And whereas these reporters are many newspaper losses to rise of 2.0, they noted it enabled them to specifically, most of them, to reach wider and larger audiences. Finally, limitations. We only interviewed 12 U.S. newspaper sports writers, so this cannot be generalized to a global or generalized at all when you're talking about qualitative research. Good mix of subjects, but purposeful sampling. And these were all veterans. These weren't part-time people. These had been, continuous employees, so they might have different opinions. And they were working for newspapers, which again has been historically the least adaptive to incorporating multimedia content of the various mediums. Thank you very much.